Stuart, hello.
Hello.
Welcome. You are the CEO of CAP, which is Christians Against Poverty, one of the leading organisations in the UK helping people in financial crisis. You organise debt advice, jobs, clubs, money coaching, life skills, and you work more broadly across the UK to fight UK poverty. I want to give a little bit of context to people listening of the kind of thing that you do. So since 1996, CAP has helped over 35,000 people become debt-free and given debt advice to over 80,000 people. That is absolutely incredible. And I don't normally do this, but I just kind of wanted to say at the start that when I spoke to you before this and we started to prep for this interview, I thought we were just going to talk about debt. I thought we were just going to talk about what things are like in the UK from your point of view as somebody who talks with people in debt day to day and knows a lot about it. But we started to chat and I started to hear your story just in general in your life. And you've had an incredible life. You're somebody who's seen, as we're about to find out, you've known poverty, you've known wealth, you've worked with people in poverty, you've worked with people with great wealth, and you now help people that are struggling financially. So, Stuart, it is an absolute honour to have you on Money and Us. Welcome, and thank you for being here today.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Just quickly, before we get into your story, because I do want to start there, can you just tell us in your words a little bit about what CAP does, just to sort of set the scene of what you're doing today?
Yeah, so CAP's 30 years old this year, and essentially we specialise in helping people who've got into some sort of financial crisis, which often invariably is they've got into unaffordable debt, and they need help to get out of it. And our particular niche is people on very low incomes with often very high levels of vulnerability. So people with chronic illnesses, single mums. 2/3 of our clients are actually women, for all sorts of reasons I'm sure we'll explore. And what we do is we help them go from utter crisis, isolation and anxiety like you wouldn't believe. About 46% of them are suicidal at the point that they come to us. And we take them to a point where they're not only debt-free, but they're financially resilient. And in those 30 years, we've cleared £500 million of debt. But it's much more than that. That's like the tip of the iceberg. If you think of whose debt that is, so we're talking about tens of thousands of relatively modest amounts of debt that are utterly crushing people who can ill afford it. But you've also got to look at how that affects their friends, their relatives, their loved ones, and then down the generation through their kids. So this has a huge impact on people who are struggling. And that's kind of what we do.
It's amazing. I feel like these things are going on behind the scenes a lot of the time around the UK, and often we don't hear about these stories of hope and things that are happening. It's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because I think we should all know about this. We should all be hearing about these positive things that are happening. I did actually ask you to prepare a little statistic today for something. So we do a little fact or fiction at the start. And I would love to know if you've got one prepared for me so I can decide whether you are telling the truth or fibbing in your fact or fiction.
Oh, right. Okay. Half the people adults in the UK will have a time when they're in unaffordable debt.
Half?
Half. 1 in 2 of us.
Goodness me. I have to say false because I can't believe that would be true. Half of people. True. Half of people in the UK
will have a time in their life.
Wow.
Where, and it almost doesn't matter how wealthy you are. If you think a lot of wealthy people are business owners and the business might go through some trouble, but if you take all the causes of debt and who actually gets into unaffordable levels of debt, and some of the wealthiest people in this country would have had that moment. Right. It's 1 in 2 of us. So that's true.
Do you think that's...
I can give you another one if you want.
Go on.
1 in 3 of us are severely stressed about our finances today.
I would say that's true.
It is true.
Yeah.
I don't need to exaggerate.
Yeah, but severely stressed though. That's
like
the sort
losing
of thing
sleep stress.
where it's really getting to you. Yeah.
And so like poverty and debt, the reaction we tend to get is that's those poor people over there.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's our friends, it's our
Yeah.
relatives, it's the people in our communities. And I'll give you a third one if you want.
Go on.
There is no district in the UK, none, which has less than 1 in 10 people who are severely stressed about their finances.
So even in the wealthiest parts of the UK, there's still somebody, 1 in 10.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, the average is 1 in 3. So if you're in a deprived area, it would be much higher.
Yeah.
But if you're in Mayfair, Kensington, Henley-on-Thames, you name the really nice places to live, everywhere. We could have one of our centres in any district, and we would be busy. Wow.
Okay. I mean, that's a great way to sort of paint the backdrop of what we're going to be talking about, because that is where we're at right now around the UK. You have got such a unique, when I heard your story, a unique point of view on wealth because of so many ways that you've interacted with wealth in your lifetime. So I do want to hear about your story, because I think people are going to see it as you start to see it, as you start to speak. I think it'll become very clear why I wanted you to tell this story, because so few of us see outside of our little bubble, whereas I feel like you've had so many viewpoints on things. So let's start at the beginning. Can you tell me what life was like for you financially when you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, if I start with my parents, because I think it shows, it explains more about how one would have felt about where I was. So my dad is from a place called Fergusley Park in Paisley, which has for many years been the most deprived social housing scheme in Scotland, and it quite often tops the charts in Europe.
Wow.
And my mum grew up as one of 11 children in a 2-bedroom flat just outside Glasgow, and they grew up just before they were born, just before World War II. So they grew up through the war and rationing and everything else. And so in anything I say about poverty, that era was just a whole different scale. And so when we were growing up in our 6 of us in a 2 up, 2 down in Coventry terraced house, we thought we were doing pretty well. I mean, on all the statistics, we would have counted as in poverty. I shared a bedroom with my 2 brothers until I was 18. I went to university. My sister's bedroom was actually a wooden construction my dad made in his bedroom, that he split his bedroom into 2, so that my sister could have a space of her own. It was a 2-bedroom house, and there were 6 of us. That's what you did. And I thought it was perfectly normal that my dad did 3 jobs and worked nearly 7 days a week. That was kind of ordinary. And if you think they grew up in Glasgow in the sort of 30s and 40s and 50s, and they both had no educational qualifications, and when the shipyard started to close, which is where they learnt their trade, they came down to Coventry, which was a boom town in the 60s, believe it or not. By the time I'm growing up in the 70s, the big factories of my youth were closing down, and it was an incredibly challenging area. We had knife crime and racial tension, and this was in the 70s. I always remember there's a song called Ghost Town by the Specials. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but that was the theme tune of my youth, because it was about a lost generation. Well, that was my lost generation. And so when I did my qualifications at 16, unemployment was through the roof, and it doubled while I did my A-levels. And I was one of very few people from my school who went to university. So at 21, I'd never met a graduate who wasn't a doctor or a teacher. I'd never been on an aeroplane. I didn't know anything about anything. And I was, I just had that background, but I'd always worked. I got my first paycheck when I was 10. My
10.
first regular job at 12, my first summer job at 14. And I know for the young of today, that's almost impossible. Try to get one of those things. Good luck. I mean, I'm saying that I was very fortunate to work from the very beginning. And then when I graduated, I just kept working. So at 42, weirdly, I was the CEO of a major business in the city of London with operations in 12 countries, flying around the world and earning ridiculous amounts of money.
So let's just unpick that a little bit, because first thing I want to know is, so growing up with not much at all and having to struggle, and I mean, it sounds like in some ways it just was, in your mind, it was what it was. That's how it was. But what do you think that did to you psychologically? Because you mentioned there about you just worked. That's what you did. You just kept working. How would you describe that?
So I think it did three things to me, and they were all interrelated. So the first thing is I absorbed my parents' intent to get out of poverty. So they worked really hard. And so I thought, oh, that's just what you did, so I just copied them, it seemed a simple thing to do. We often copy our parents. But also, I do remember, and I did feel, even as a young child, those moments of, as it were, almost shame.
Right.
When not having money means you can't do things. I can remember moments of embarrassment from both my mum and my dad when they just kind of, in situations, couldn't do what they needed to do because there just wasn't enough money. And so in some ways, I also absorbed their motivation to do that. And then also, the thing is about, and I've learned this throughout my life, that the smartest people with money aren't the rich. The smartest people with money are the poor. And so I also learned, some very good financial habits,
right?
Which has stood me in relatively good stead, to this day, and also a sense of generosity, because I think you'd find the data would also tell you that the most generous people aren't the rich people; it's those with less. So in some ways, it was a great background, but it gave me a very particular viewpoint, which stays with you.
Yeah. And we'll see that play out in the rest of your story, I think, as we talk it through. But you did go to uni. You did then find yourself getting a really amazing job in the heart of London. And you said that you've already mentioned that you kind of climbed the ladder in that sense and got to the point where you were suddenly making a lot of money. So can you tell us, like, just the difference from what you came from to where you got to financially? What happened?
So I often say I climbed the greasy pole and found myself up a greasy pole. I mean, it's kind of like I had no idea. I was earning the money, and it was very helpful. I mean, neither me or my wife knew what to do with it. We were both from very modest backgrounds,
right?
And I think as having worked with wealthy people, you're often not trying to get wealthy. You're just doing what you do, building a business or building a career. So I mean, it got to the stage where, one year I got £1 million bonus, and then what do you do with that? I mean, it's like, I did what I did with most things. I saved a bit, but I ended up, with a nice house in Hertfordshire, a flat in London, a house by the sea on the East Coast, and Aston Martin in the garage.
Oh my goodness!
And all of those things. But if I'm really honest, if I look at photos of me at that time, I'm quite sad about it, if I'm really honest. There's one particular passport photo I can remember, and there's this red-cheeked guy, overweight, kind of those dead kind of eyes, the false smile. And I wasn't particularly happy. I mean, the world told me I was a tremendous success, a mover and a shaker, and all those sorts of nice things. But it was, yeah, in the end, okay, you go on slightly nicer holidays, you have a slightly nicer car, you live in a slightly better house, but it's, well, what's the meaning of that? And I was sort of reaching the point of, hang on, I've climbed this mountain, oh, they've gone up the greasy pole. What am I actually doing here? What was this for? Because you trace it back, it was all about my mum and dad, reacting to the closure of the shipyards, me reacting to the closure of the big factories in Coventry. My first wife, who sadly died of cancer a bit later in this story, she was a miner's daughter. We got married in Barnsley Town Hall in 1984 in the miners' strike. So the mines were all gone. So my CV, as a youngster, charts the industrial decline of this country. I'm an economic migrant, like many others. That fueled me. But I end up in this particular place where it looks great, but what's it for? And if you don't know what you're doing it for, then there are issues, and I don't know how far you want me to carry on with this.
I mean, it's just remarkable that even that the distance you came in that time. But you've mentioned there that the unimaginable, excuse my words, the unimaginable did happen in that you sadly lost your wife unexpectedly, and she was, we were talking earlier, she was quite young still. Must have been a really difficult time, and you told me before about this moment you had outside the Gherkin in London. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because that must have been a very challenging time. You've got all these material possessions. You've kind of had a lot of success in material terms, but this happens. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's I'm standing outside the Gherkin after a lunch, because there's a sort of restaurant on the top. I don't know if you know
I've
that.
Been up there.
It's
so
really
nice.
nice.
Yeah.
It's great. I used to go there all the time. And it was a great place to take visitors, because you can see the city. And actually, on some occasions, there are eagles fly past, because they use eagles to get rid of the pigeons around the city. So you get some spectacular views, and certain weather patterns are great. And I came down, and it's actually, it's winter. There's light snow, that's that sort of powdery snow falling, and so I'm standing outside. I'm freezing cold, and I just go, "What am I doing?" At that point, I'm a single parent of 3 kids. I've just lost my wife, and all the money in the world was hadn't solved my biggest problem. I'm lonely, I'm grieving, I'm just lost. And my little family, as we lost Jane, my first wife, we just clumped together. So there's the 4 of us clumped in this emotional knot, and without necessarily a map to solve that. And if I'm really honest, I'd lost all interest in my job and my career. I mean, it was just, all of that had gone. And this sounds like a sad moment, but it wasn't. It was a moment of release. Wow. It was like, right, well, I can do something different then. I have no clue what that would look like, but I'd gone through this almost awful experience, and Christianity is a huge part of my life, and it was, what I was thinking was, in some ways, the old me died with Jane, and I was being almost born again. So it was 2 people died, and that's how I think about that time. Like, old Stewart went, Jane went, my old life went.
Wow.
And I'd almost like going, right, well, I could be a grown-up now. Yeah. And so, a lot of people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, sometimes you reach a point in your life where that's a good question to ask. Okay, I'm 46 at the time, but, you can ask that question at any time. And thankfully I had good friends. I had, a strong sort of family bond, and I had a basis on which I could ask that question and move forward.
And I somewhat relate. I know we were actually meant to record this a few weeks ago, but I sadly had a loss of my own. And I relate to that feeling of the world becoming almost like HD after a loss. Like all the colours are brighter, all the noises are louder, and it's like you can see suddenly. And some of the stuff that you thought was so important before is just not anymore. And I think by the sound of what you just said, that kind of happened to you in quite a profound way. And I want to come to this point on meaning, because that's something that I've been really thinking about in the last few weeks, about meaning and purpose, and making sure that I do something that, and that's partly why I want to do this podcast, because I just think the world needs hope right now, and I want to be bringing some hope with some of the discussions we're having. But you, like you mentioned your faith there, and you actually did have a real moment of purpose of what am I doing? How can I help people with my knowledge, my skills? And others listening may well be at that moment right now, or they may have gone through something similar and will relate. So can you talk us through sort of that real come to God moment, I guess, of what am I doing next? What am I doing with my life?
Yeah, I mean, it took a little. So what I'm going to describe took a little while.
Okay,
so
good,
it's like, I think if this was an advert, it would say this is speeded up. But essentially, it really started very, very gently with, I arranged Jane's funeral. I hadn't been to church for a million years. The nice rector who came round to my house to arrange all this said, "Why don't you pop along?" I popped along. And I often say it was the ordinary processes of any church that got me. It wasn't some fancy program. That it was actually the welcome team spotted this guy weeping at the back. The pastoral care team wrapped around me and set me up with a coffee with John and Margaret, who are sadly no longer with us, who would on a Saturday morning just chat to me. And they had a small group that met at their house on a Wednesday. So those guys sort of wrapped around me and became a little family. And John was a great believer in giving you a job if you were getting involved in a church. So I know my numbers. He made me the treasurer. I didn't get any choice in it, but you never do with that job. You get mugged. It created a kind of healing process that was the only thing that really made any sense in my life at that time. It was almost at the start of it, I often describe it as I felt, I just had no clue what I was doing. I kind of lost the map to life. And then as I progressed, I felt this real sense of, whilst my world was still lonely and dark and grey, there was a real presence alongside me. So, this presence wasn't saying anything or particularly doing anything, but it was there. I wasn't on my own anymore. And these amazing people through faith that came around me who knew more brokenness than I did. Because what I started with, I think a lot of people do this actually. You start with, the thing that's just happened to me is the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody in the entire world, and nobody understands me, and nobody's been what I've been through. I'm special and different, and that is just making yourself a victim, if I'm really honest. So I got amongst all these amazing people, and pretty much lots of things far worse than had happened to me had happened to them. I mean, they could always trump my ace, no matter what I said about what I was going through. Not in any kind of show-offy way, but they knew grief, and they knew what it was to be a single parent, and they knew, and nobody judged me. They just gave me the support I needed, and gradually my life started to make sense. Being a worker, I read more things than you can possibly imagine. I got involved. I worked at this thing that was giving me just enormous amounts of comfort. And then took about 3 years in the end to think, actually, this point I mentioned of I am being born again. Which is more. I was essentially a death and a rebirth, and then I got to a sort of a baptism moment, because actually, if you think about it, if you look at the theology of baptism, as you go under, that's a death to an old self.
It is, yeah.
And as you come up, it's a birth to a new self. So I'd been christened and everything. So I'm in an Anglican church, and so we arranged a full immersion baptism in an Anglican church for somebody who's already been christened. I'm not sure we told the bishop.
Breaking all the rules.
Like all the rules got broken here. But it was very symbolic and very important for me that's what had happened to me. And that's a pattern that many people have in their lives. That moment of a huge event actually begs a reinvention. There's a book I quite like, if people like book recommendations, Falling Upwards by Richard Rohr, is actually about that sort of moment in people's lives. And what you often find is that's a point where people move from the sort of faith of their childhood to their faith of their maturity, because all of a sudden you really are dealing with life and death, and your ego's pretty much smashed to bits anyway. So if you ever had one, it's gone. And it's that sense of, right, well, what an opportunity. And the piece of wisdom in all of that is not to fight, but to surrender, not to be hard-hearted and a victim, but to be soft-hearted and open to a new way of looking at life.
And you really did change direction, didn't you? Because, I mean, you used your skills that you'd already been developing, and you asked yourself the question, how can I help people? Which is where you actually started to work in a very different way and worked with World Vision at that time. So can you tell us about that work that you then found yourself doing?
Yeah, I mean, again, just starting one step before, because I think it's from you. So I'm an insurance executive. And I want to have, well, who needs an insurance executive? I mean, it's not the handiest skill set, you think. It's kind of like, oh, you know.
My dad was insurance, don't knock it.
I know, but it's very, it's niche. You know, does God need an insurance executive? I don't know. So I met with my friend Andy Brooks. We'd worked in the city, and he'd got a job, you know, doing related things. So he was CEO of the London Diocese. So we both there was this greasy spoon cafe called the Atlas Cafe where the taxi drivers go near Victoria. So we go there, and it's a heart attack on a plate. It's absolutely fantastic. And so it's really, really big breakfast. And I just go, well, you've made the transition from city to meaning. What do you do? 3 days later, I'm talking to a Christian headhunter. I didn't know there were Christian headhunters. Never even crossed my mind there might be such a thing. And literally 6 weeks later, I'm working for World Vision as their first global insurance director. I mean, a child-centric Christian charity, one of the biggest charities in the world. And a few weeks after that, I'm in Ghana doing, helping smallholder farmers deal with climate shocks.
I find that image just so amazing. There's you outside the Gherkin on a snowy day, and then there's you helping farmers in Ghana not so long later. It's quite a shift. For those that don't know much about World Vision, what's the kind of, can you explain just a little bit about how they help people and what they do around the world?
Yeah, so World Vision it invented essentially child sponsorship. And now it's huge. So it's 40,000 employees in 100 countries, 2.7 billion in revenues, and it's transforming. And the best way to think about it is think of 2,000 villages being supported by a charity in the most deprived areas of the world, with a specific remit of boosting children's lives. And my particular job was in microfinance, which was much more to do with mums than children. So it was the question we were working on is, how do mums get good livelihoods and resilient livelihood so that they can look after their children in order for their families to prosper. And so that's where I ended up. And just to add, well, how does that feel? When I was in insurance, my kids told their friends I was a spy because all they knew was I traveled a lot and they didn't care about what I did. They just didn't want anything to do with it. So they just thought, well, he must be a spy because we don't talk about what he does. He travels a lot and he's got an Aston Martin.
I love kids' brains. This is so good.
So when I was working for World Vision, they told their friends about what I was doing. And those friends asked questions.
Wow.
And it meant something to them. And they actually, I mean, my son, who was the last one at home, I actually took him on a trip once to actually go out there and see how people really live. Because only 10% of the world live like this. 90% live like the people I was working with. So if you want to see humanity, be out there with and it's wonderful when the tarmac road runs out and the dirt track runs out and you're just going across land and then you meet people who are having the most amazing lives in communities you would never see as a tourist or anything else. It was just such an adventure.
Wow.
And so it turned out, and doing that in a way that really benefits children across the globe. It was a great work to be part of, and the beginning of an incredible adventure.
Did that change your perspective on life in the UK doing that kind of work? And because we are in a bit of a bubble here, like you've just said, how did that change how you see things?
Oh, completely, loads of ways. To give you one example, in the UK, we say that faith is dying out, that actually in due course we will be an entirely secular world. So I was in the Philippines working on the recovery from Typhoon Haiyan, helping restore the fishing industry actually on some of the islands. And when the Pope arrived, and it's a Catholic nation of 80 million people. And so he arrives, and I was in an airport hotel right by the airport as he's arriving. And so we popped out to say hello. I found myself in a crowd of 7 million people.
Really?
7 million.
I've never seen a crowd of 7 million.
There was a youth rally of 6 million. So when you work in the global south, you go. So someone says, "Oh, your faith's dying out." I'm going, where are you? Well,
yes.
you're absolutely. If I look in my town or. Yeah, but no, absolutely not. The thing that's under most threat is secularism. I got to say, it's and I don't want to be threatening to anybody, but it just changes your perspective. You tend to think and like the poor of the world must be doing something wrong. well, they're not. When you actually see how smart. You have to be to survive in these countries, and I would say Africa's going to have the biggest population in the world in the next few years. It's got the youngest at the moment. Watch out! Those people are smart. They have to be. They've got no choice, and they're entrepreneurial. As that catches. Watch this space. The most amazing things are going to happen. I'll give you an example. I was working in Tanzania with some bean farmers, as you do, and great beans in Tanzania. Get your beans from Tanzania.
Noted.
You probably do. If you go to Waitrose, those little tins of mixed beans, look on the label. You're probably Tanzania. So we're doing loads of things to get there. I don't know how many financial products you use. You might have a loan, a mortgage. You might have 4 or 5. Their average was 11 different financial products they were using during a year to manage their way through. Because $2 a day, which is is what we say about people in that situation isn't $2 a day, because they have to invest in preparing the ground, in planting a crop, and then eventually they there's a harvest, and then they have to distribute that harvest, and then they probably have 2 or 3 other jobs, and so each family is like a little micro business if you really look at it, and so it gives you a completely different view. If the world was fair, the richest people on the planet would be African women. If it was entirely fair. And it went to how smart you are and how hard you work. And if it was a true meritocracy, those guys would be at the top of the tree. Wow. I kid you not.
Wow.
And I think those perspective shifts are invaluable, I think. And I would recommend to anybody, get out there and look at what's really going on in the world.
Yeah. It's just fascinating that viewpoint you have, and so few get to do that, to go out and see more than just their own life and what's going on here. It might do the odd holiday here and there, but you rarely ever see something like that or get into another culture in that way. So it's amazing to hear. And I do want to touch upon your next bit of work before we get to CAP, because this is fascinating too, because you went from working with the poorest in the world to then moving on to a charity called Stewardship, where you're working with the wealthiest in the UK, correct me if I'm wrong, helping them give away their money. Talk me through it. This episode of Money and Us is sponsored by XTB. I think a lot of people sit on the edge of investing for quite a while. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. You know you probably should be doing something more with your money, but you're worried about getting it wrong. You feel like you need to understand everything before you start, so you wait. But one of the things I've learned over the years is that confidence doesn't usually come before action. It comes from taking small steps, learning as you go, and building understanding over time. And investing can be just like that too. It's not about trying to get rich quickly or making perfect decisions. It's about allowing your money to grow over the long term and developing your confidence along the way. That's where XTB can help. XTB offers access to a range of investment options alongside educational resources and tools designed to help you learn and make informed decisions as you go. If investing is something you've been meaning to explore but haven't quite known where to start, XTB could be a useful place to begin. To find out more, just click the link for XTB below this video. And remember, your capital is at risk when investing, and it's important to understand what you're investing in. Investment values can rise or fall. Always do your research.
Yeah, this sounds crazy, doesn't it? So I'm working with and I'd finished this massive project for World Vision, where we actually created the world's largest non-governmental climate insurance scheme to help smallholder farmers around the world. So
that was to do with climate change, wasn't it?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So that was a real success. My project was in The Economist, and your project doesn't get in The Economist very often.
Yeah.
And this call comes to go and lead this generosity charity, and I'm going, What leave behind a 30-year insurance career and all my skills and everything else and start afresh. And you often go, again, if you're a Christian, you have to go, God, what are you what? What is this even a thing? And if I'm really honest, part of it was also my wife was fed up of me traveling around the world and never seeing me. And I'd finished something and so, okay, I'm being led to this. And the interesting thing, I think, why now? Why me? And interestingly, being a sort of disaster specialist, why I thought, well, I've also no longer going to use those skills. But lo and behold, we were in the middle of COVID just about 6 months after I joined. And I go, I'm home. I know what to do.
Right.
So I'm at the middle of a huge funding flow into the Christian community. Stewardship distributes about £100 million a year to Christian causes from about 30,000 donors and tries to make that as impactful as it possibly can.
So some people, sorry to jump in, but some people won't know these kinds of things exist, because I didn't really know about stewardship till like a couple of years ago. But there's lots of charities like this that actually help people give away their money in a way that actually makes a difference. So sorry, carry on. I just think it's just important to like flag that this is like going on all the time and we don't often hear about it.
Yeah, because again, this might sound in some ways they shouldn't exist, but they do, because the issue comes like if it's on your heart to be generous and to support causes, how on earth do you know who to support? You've got all the big ones who are advertising you and chasing you your money, and they're on telly and everything. But is that who you actually want to support? And or just the ones you bump into? But sometimes it's smart to do proper discernment and say, well, what do I really want to give to? And what are my options out there to really have an impact, and to find things that you really love and that actually that you become part of the cause and actually establish a relationship for them. Well, stewardship essentially is the Christian version of that. It's like, it takes people from a position of, right, I want to give and I want to be generous, but I want that to really be meaningful to me and for it to have an impact. Right, well, let's help you do that.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of tremendous honor. And then you say, well, hang on, what problem do these incredibly wealthy people have? And why would that fit with what you were doing before? And the connections are really faith and finance. So the thing I do is how do faith and finance come together? And the problem was very similar to the one I'd been faced with before, which was you climb this first mountain and you gather resources, and then people end up either with wealth from a career or from being business owners, and then you go, what do I do next?
What do I do with it? Yeah.
And some people also refer to that as, what's your second mountain?
Right.
What do you do then?
Yeah.
And if you're blessed with resources, part of that can be, investing in things or indeed kind of philanthropy. And you can do that at any level, but you come to a point in your life where you say, no, I really do want to engage in making a difference in society. And I want to discern what I want to do there. But what you also see, and I don't think, I'm not asking you to feel sorry for people with enormous resources, but you'll get a typical story would be, I've built a business, I've sold it, and suddenly I have 10, 20, 30 million pounds or more in my bank account. And you think, you're sorted, isn't that wonderful? But from a Christian perspective, you're then left with some massive problems that you have to grapple with. So problem one is, what as a Christian do I do with wealth?
Yes.
So few of us are taught, right, well, this is what you should do in that scenario. Yep. You've reached a point in your life without a map.
Yeah.
You've then got your accountants and your lawyers and all those people saying, protect yourself from your family, hide it away, build a bigger barn, make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And quite often, I think, particularly people of faith, but many other people go, well, I want to do something with this.
Yeah.
I don't just want to. Most people who've gathered that sort of resources have got quite active. So I don't want to be kind of passively just have it and make it bigger, stick it in the bank. And there's a lot of Christian teaching that says, don't do that. It's not a good plan. So it's like, what do I do? And then you've also got to think about, what's the legacy I'm going to leave when I pass?
Yeah.
And the biggest part of that is often, what about my children?
Yeah.
And it can be a huge assault on the identity of children. As suddenly your parents they were hardworking and they were doing this, and now they're not. And you can also get that thing where the parent's success just eclipses the child.
Yes.
And so for the children of the wealthy, there's a double problem. And that takes a lot of work to sort of say, well, you know, and the track record of kids of wealthy people and what the impact it has on their lives is not impressive in a lot of cases. So as a parent, you've got an issue. As a Christian, you've got an issue, and then what also happens is that is quite often people get going on their own, and they find that they're unhappy with the advice they got, they're unhappy with what they're giving to, they're unhappy with where they get to, and they're also super busy, and they've got every fundraiser on the planet chasing them down the street.
Yeah.
So I always said that what stewardship created was almost a distress purchase for those with resources to say, right, how do we then gain control over that? How do you, and it wasn't necessarily just by giving advice. It was, how do you meet people further along the journey? How do you meet your peers and how do you get good teaching and preaching? And I'm not saying there wouldn't be good teaching in churches, but very often, if you're going to an ordinary church, nobody has the same issue you have.
Yeah.
So how do you get some slightly more specialist stuff?
Yeah.
How are there Christian advisors out there who would take a different perspective to what you're trying to achieve? And so it was really architecting that in a way that's really constructive, and the joy that brings and the benefit to others that brings can be absolutely incredible. And just one final thing I'll say is, during COVID, stewardship grew 40%. And I'd love to tell you that was because I'm a marvelous CEO.
It was me.
It was me. All right, brilliant. That was what was also happening at the time. Was the Christian community, we saw there's a crisis, we're going to step forward.
Yeah.
We're going to help, and what that's still happening today. It's when everybody pushed forward on food banks, on the sorts of stuff CAP does, on Make Lunch for Kids with TLG and various other people. And what we did at Stewardship, we quietly raised £5 million in the first 2 weeks of COVID and distributed 100 grants in 100 days thereafter, and just did that all to just get the Christian community going and almost like catalyze a sense of, right, there's a crisis, but let's not stop, let's go.
Yeah.
And what people saw in that period has continued to this day. If you look at the statistics, I love my numbers, so you're going to get lots.
You're in the right
of
place, Stuart, to be honest.
So as we stand today, we did a survey just a few months ago. 25% of everybody in this country, all adults in this country, say that a friend or a relative has been helped by church in the last 5 years. And 65% of all adults say that they expect the churches in their community to help someone in their community this year. So the difference in how the church is perceived now, because of that push, during and after COVID into the cost of living crisis, and it continues, is it's seen as much more relevant than it was, I would say, a decade ago.
It's good to hear. I do think that so I'm aware that lots of people will be listening from different faith backgrounds and different places. There will be Christians listening, there'll be people without faith. But I do think in the media and stuff, I've always wanted to do an episode on money and faith and just look at that intersection, because I think it is fascinating. But I think in the media, it is often the case that you just hear about all the corruption, you hear about all the people squandering wealth or trying to take from the poor. And there's a lot of stories like that. And I think it's interesting to hear from somebody who's seeing the other end of the spectrum, where you're actually looking at a faith-based group who are actually doing something positive and giving back and seeing that trend happening. Have you got any other examples of bits of generosity going on behind the scenes that people might not know about, but that don't make the headlines, that you think people would want to hear?
I mean, I think a lot of this goes a little bit too behind the scenes. I mean, I think I mean, there are certain things getting into the media, like the big set, the London Marathon, or the Children in Need appeal, but there's still an awful lot of quiet work happening in communities. And I think our society's sort of diminished by that in that what we live in is like a 2D world, or a lot of people live in is a 2D world where they say either the government has to sort something out or the market has to, i.e. the economy. And we've sort of forgotten about civil society. And I come from the faith community, so I'll talk a lot about the church. But I would say the mosques are doing exactly the same thing. I'd say the synagogues are doing exactly the same thing. And also I think that there's a lot of really powerful secular organizations doing exactly the same thing. And good luck to them. There are people motivated really to do something in their community for their community. And Christians Against Poverty, we work with 1,000 churches, and really we're just a support system for them to do their thing in their community. We'll talk a bit more about that later, but it's really, we're a community action enabler charity. What the real action is is locally. And I think there's something really important about that generosity of spirit in local communities, people coming alongside their friends, their relatives, their neighbors, people with the same accent, people who know the same streets. That's where it really gets embedded. And you see examples of this. I mean, and it's a generosity. I mean, this is a little bit of a cap story, but I met this lady twice, a year apart, and she was from a very abusive background in terms of from when she was a child, and she escaped her family, and of course she went into a slightly abusive relationship with her partner. Three daughters later, she's in her early 30s. Life is chaos. There's antipsychotic drugs, recreational drugs. The kids are in trouble. The family's under social services and all this. And she gets this tiny little debt problem and comes along to one of our centres, and okay, we can solve all the sort of the sort of finance stuff, but that's not the important part of this story. She found a group of people who actually wanted to help and help the family as a whole, and so the whole church just wrapped around this little family. A year later, I met her. I couldn't recognise her. I mean, in fact, I sat down opposite her at a lunch, and I'm always the last to lunch, so I sit down, and she's literally sitting opposite me. And she said, "Oh, nice to see you again. I'm really sorry. Did we meet?" And she said, "Yeah, what?" This is immaculately dressed woman sitting next to her daughter, who looked absolutely incredible. And in that household today, there's no drugs at all of any description. The kids are in school. Her partner and her have reconciled. They're going through real work because they're both victims of their background. And they got married. But the church was so pleased with what it had done that they got married in the church service, not in some separate thing.
Yeah.
So the community fully embraced what they were doing. And you've got a family there going through incredible healing. And that's a generosity of, none of that was about money. Okay, we got rid of a few money problems here and there in our normal technical kind of way, but it was all about people with a heart for their community, of people who are really struggling, of not judging but helping and supporting people through.
Yeah.
And the difference that will make to those three girls' chances in life is incalculable. Now that's generosity, in my view.
I want to touch on that word judging, because you said that the not judging part. Do you think we still have a problem in our culture of judging people who are in financial difficulty, and that is a bit of a barrier we have to get over?
Like you wouldn't believe. Our typical client is a lady sitting prospective client is a lady sitting at home in her pajamas all day, with the curtains closed, without anybody to turn to. Nobody's coming to visit her. Her relationship's probably broke down, and we have to work hard to spot her. She's not going to come to us for help. Almost invariably, it's the doctor, the local shop, the DWP. Somebody goes, look, you've got a problem. You can go to these guys, and they will help you. At the point that she's waited at least a year in incredible levels of stress and isolation, and almost a quarter of the people who come to us has waited 3 years. So you're talking about fundamental. It gets to the stage. I mean, I was talking to a lady who, and this was only a few weeks ago, who had decided this was her lot in her life. So she sat in that problem for a decade, because she just decided that's what was meant for her, and that was what life was going to be. And this is an incredibly bright woman. It's yeah, that's what we're facing, and a lot of that is shame, and it drives everything under the surface. I was doing an interview, a radio interview, and the chap said, we had a nice interview. Can we just talk afterwards? And I thought, yeah, I'm always happy to talk. And he said, I just wanted to share that my father died recently. I went, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. Do you want to talk about that? He said, well, it's a particular aspect. We were going through his papers, and we were a really close family, and we found that he'd been in debt and none of us had known about it, and that you'd been the people who helped him.
Wow.
And the family just want to thank you.
Wow.
Just imagine how secret that is. That's the shame working. A close family didn't know that their dad had a debt problem, and he'd gone off and thankfully got a chance to solve it himself. And it shouldn't be shameful. That's why I say half of us are going to have this problem.
Yeah.
A third of us are in stress.
Yeah.
There is help out there if you need it. And that help won't judge you, not just CAP. We wouldn't even dream of judging you, because we know what gets people into these situations. We've seen this. Every scenario you can explain to us, we've seen 1,000 times, if not 10,000 times. And all we would love to do is help people.
It's amazing. I want to close the loop a little bit on your story.
Oh, go on.
Before we do a few little, I'd like to do a few little practical tips to end just on for people, because I don't think people realise the help that is available. So if somebody's listening to this and they are struggling with debt secretly, or they are feeling that sense of shame, or they're going to be judged, it'd be nice to sort of point them in the right direction today. But the reason that I just think this is so fascinating is we've talked about your early start in life with being in poverty, coming out of that, getting a career that rocketed you into great amounts of wealth, giving that all up when you lost your wife and you had that moment of realization, then going to help the poorest in the world, around the world, then going to help the richest in the UK give to the poor. Now you come to CAP. So this is the moment where you've been asked to come and be the CEO of CAP. I think you said it better than I'm going to do it justice. There was a thing that you told me before about how you marry that with your early years and what this was like coming to this job where you're helping people in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah,
well, so again, the potential to apply for the CAP job comes up. I'm having a great time at stewardship. I'm at this point 60 years old.
Yes.
I've lived in the same place for 30 years, just north of London. And this chance to move to Bradford comes up, take a giant pay cut, and completely start again. And just at the moment where most people are thinking about retirement, I get the opportunity to really go again and go big time. And my initial reaction was a little bit negative, if I'm honest. And I went to my wife. So I remarried after Jane's death about 7 years later. And I goes to Sarah, this has come up. What do you think? And she went, go for it. It's you. This is something you've really got to do. And I was utterly shocked because that meant so much to her.
Yeah.
Uprooting ourselves, we're really settled and established, as you might think. And it came in some ways at a cost, but there's a completion in me for this. This is where, all I've learned over 42 years of work can now be turned around to what my family and I were always running from was poverty, and the effects of poverty and the shame of poverty and the difficulties of it. And I was given the opportunity to complete my career actually turning round with 4,000 of my mates and going, right, now we're going to fight back. And there was something really, really about completing a circle there that just had such meaning for me that I just couldn't pass it up. It was remarkable. And there was lots of other reasons, push and pull, and there always are, but that at the heart of it has been the greatest honor of my life in some ways. And it's quite different. CAP is essentially you're leading a movement rather than an organization, because there's about 300 of us in the charity, but in churches and community organizations across the UK, there are 4,000 people actually doing the work that we support. And then if you look at the people funding that, there's nearly 40,000 who are supporting that work and are very deeply connected to it. And so that's a scale. In Debt Advice, we're as big as Citizens Advice Bureau now. So this is essentially largely the church doing something world class, because we're FCA regulated. We've got all the accreditations you can possibly see. This is very professional work done to an incredible quality locally from churches at scale with huge impact. And it's just such an honor to be any part of that. And it's yet another adventure. I look at those three jobs, World Vision, stewardship, and CAP as my midlife crisis. Because it's kind of like, I'm starting this at 50 with a complete reinvention of who I am and what I do, and what that's given me. I feel, never mind. People say, "Oh, you're so generous for doing." No, I'm not. I'm having the absolute time of my life because the things I get to see in my working life are just incredible.
It's a long way from the greasy pole climbing up there.
Yes. No greasy poles are involved or are being harmed as part of this particular process. Quite the opposite. I mean, you think you find happiness in wealth and status and all those things, and I tried that, and I didn't find it there. Quite the opposite. But actually, working with vulnerable people in their most difficult time, I found a happiness and a satisfaction I could never believe. And C.S. Lewis has a quote I quite like: "Is joy is the serious business of heaven."
Wow, I don't think I've heard that one.
It's a really good one, and you have to think about it quite a lot to kind of properly get it. Because you think, God, mate, you're a psychopath. How are you getting joy out of such distress? But it's not out of people's distress. It's the joy of seeing ordinary people spectacularly ordinary people go out there and help their fellow man in their community. And to see the impact of that is incredible. And there was a story I've been telling recently. Is our founder John Kirkby, who's been a dear friend of mine much longer than I've had this job. He went back to the original church that CAP was founded in Shipley near Bradford, and he's a nosy Parker. So there's a bunch of young guys having a rare time in this church. So he goes, "Where did they come from? Where'd you get such a vibrant youth group? That's incredible." And the person turns to him and says, "Look again. Those are the children of the people you helped in 96, 97, 98, and 99." And he could recognize from their faces who they'd helped. And so it's one of those things where I think when you're really talking about transformation, you're not talking about just the person, you're talking about their immediate loved ones, but also their kids down the ages. And there's something really special about any kind of involvement in that.
It's amazing. I think the world needs more stories like this right now. I think that's partly why I really was so looking forward to talking to you today, because I think the missing word is hope in a lot of the narrative in today's world. People are doing their best. People are trying to navigate these times that are so uncertain, with more curveballs being thrown at us left, right and centre. And I think one of the things I love about what CAP does is just the hope that you offer people, is saying there is a way through. And I think people that I speak to about debt, and having had conversations with lots of people about the cost of living crisis, people that are struggling, I think one of the things I love about people that have helped so many people through difficult situations is the confidence that I get from people, talking to people like yourself, that you say there is always hope, there's always a way through, there's always something you can do, there's always a next step, don't give up, we can help you. And so just like, I'd like to let people know of things like, I know that on your website you have a chat bot. So if you're feeling like you don't want to talk to someone face to face, you don't want to pick up the phone, they can just, for free, have a little chat and see next steps. Can you give us some other little pointers of somebody listening, or they know somebody who needs to get some help? Maybe they think their debt's too small. Maybe they think their situation's not a big enough situation to actually approach a charity like CAP. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that there is help out there, definitely, and I would say take that step and go and find it, and different people will be comfortable with different things. I mean, you can ring us on 0800 328 0006 anytime in working hours. You can just go to a church, any church. You can go to a Citizens Advice Bureau. You can. The thing is, we all cross-refer to each other anyway. So if we can't help you, we'll find someone who can. If they can't help you, they'll find someone who can. It's all about sticking your hand up. And again, if that's too onerous, talk to your medical professional, talk to almost anybody, and also know we're looking for you, not in a bad way, but we're always looking for people to help. And it is out there, not just from CAP. There's some amazing people out there of all flavours. If you're using a food bank, ask them. They'll signpost you. There's a whole. We know that this is a difficult step for people to take, and so we're constantly trying to find ways to make it easier for people to come in. Watch Martin Lewis. He's always talking about who's out there to help. He always mentions us very nicely. Don't just take our word for it. And this is something where you won't be judged, and you'll get not just the practical but the emotional help, certainly with us, that you need to do something. And quite often, quite a lot of because we actually come to people's homes. and that can be a difficult step for someone. I mean, I was just thinking of one guy recently who was very nervous about having someone in his home. He hadn't had someone in for years. So he actually, and during the first meeting, covered himself with a blanket just so he couldn't be seen.
Right.
And we'll cope with that. And then people will say, Christians against poverty, do I have to be a Christian? No, almost none of our clients are Christians. I mean, we're always amazed if it's anybody and everybody of all faiths and none, that where you're from really that doesn't matter, and it doesn't affect how we work with you. I just absolutely encourage people, and we know how isolated this feels. I mean, 80% of the people we work with are frightened to answer the door, the phone, or the post. 51% are frightened to leave their home. 46% have considered taking their lives. We know what that feels like, and the person that you ring up or speak to is very highly trained in helping you through without any form of judgment. And I would, in some ways, our mission is to make sure nobody's out there going through this alone, and there's no time like the present. And sometimes people come to us, and the first chat is all they need. Or the first meeting, or the budget we put together, or just to talk about how you deal with the bailiff at the door, or whatever it is. Nobody has to go all the way through to the process. As I say, the numbers over 30 years are 100,000. We visited 100,000 homes, 80,000 people got advice, and 35,000 people went all the way through to a debt-free solution. It doesn't mean that 65,000 people didn't get what they needed. No, they got all through that process. Some people just about half the people we interact with at the beginning just needed somebody to talk to. And then, about half of the people who are left then really just need us to run a budget and give them a little bit of advice. And then there are people who just need their hands holding all the way through. And our guys will sit on the phone with you as you talk to the water company and all the other people hassling you. And it takes a while to sort all this out, I would say. As soon as your creditors know that we're on the pitch, they quieten down quite quickly.
Got you. You've got a good reputation in that regard.
Yeah.
It's good. I would like to say that I will be linking to you under this episode. So if anybody's listening and they'd like to either give to support what you're doing, or they would like help and support for themselves, we'll put the various links across. And I've absolutely loved this conversation. I knew it was going to be good. I would like to finish with one question I ask everybody, and I am keen to hear what your answer is going to be. It's going to have to be a 30-second answer.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's excellent. Stewart, we've talked about a lot, but what does wealth mean to you?
So I often say the last few years, and I quote this incredibly religious book called The Grinch, in that my heart's grown 3 sizes. And wealth is about the meaning that comes from your life, the relationships you have with friends and families and your community, and to go from a job where I'm standing outside the Gherkin in my nice suit, during the snow and the cold, and the coldness not just of the weather but of what I was doing, to the warmth I see in people's eyes about what we're doing today. That's real wealth. And in the Bible it says, store up your treasure in heaven. That's what you're doing. And just in getting involved, I'm not saying people should give all their money away. Don't hear that from me. You certainly wouldn't hear that from me. But I do think that there's more to life than and I'm so glad I discovered that. But it took the death of my first wife to shake me out of it where I was. That's wealth for me.
Incredible. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here, cheering you on.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Listening to this podcast, you'll notice that we cover a lot of different areas when it comes to money. But one thing I hear all the time is, how do I actually pull this together and apply it to my own finances? And that's why I wrote Money Mentor. This book takes all of these key ideas from mindset to managing your money to growing it and showing you how to apply them step by step in your real life, month to month. It's not about being perfect with money. It's about having a clear plan and knowing what to do next. Inside the book, you'll also get access to practical tools, including my own budgeting framework and additional resources to help you actually implement what you're learning. Because knowing what to do is one thing, but putting it into action is where everything starts to change. I've had so many messages from people saying that it has helped them to finally feel clear and more in control of their money. So if you're ready to feel more in control of your finances and build a system that actually works for you, you can access Money Mentor using the link below this episode.